I've officially read every single Nightwing comic from 1995 to 2025. And today, I'm going to break down the highs and the lows of his entire existence. We're going to be diving into the nitty-gritty of every single run, what I love about them, and what had me throwing my comic book across the room and wanting to just scream. We're kicking things off with his first solo title from 1995, but before that, he was Nightwing, just no ongoing series until 1995. So strap in, toss this on the background if you're gaming, and let's talk about Dick Grayson's 30 years in comics. So before Nightwing got his first long-running series, he had a 4-part mini simply called Nightwing. Written by Dennis O'Neil and art by Greg Land, the story focused on Dick uncovering more about his parents' death. It had that detective comic feel, and while it was enjoyable, it really didn't add much or set up much in the long haul. What truly got people hooked into sticking around for Dick Grayson's journey was Chuck Dixon's run. Dixon's run lasted a whopping 70 plus issues. And yes, back then, writers and artists did stay on series longer than they do today, but 70 issues is a big deal. But Dixon here, he wanted to define Nightwing. His goal was clear: make Dick Grayson an A-list character. And in my opinion, he mostly succeeded. Dixon blended the gritty darkness of the Bat family with the lightheartedness of characters like Spider-Man. It worked because he made Nightwing feel fresh, with humor and a level of fun that separated him from Batman. This was Nightwing who would crack a joke mid-fight, adding a laid-back, almost cheeky vibe to being a hero. It was a huge shift from Batman's more brooding style, and it worked. And right off the bat, no pun intended, Dixon set up Bloodhaven as this grimy, corrupt city that actually might be worse than Gotham in some ways. Throwing in a hopeful, young hero in the middle of it made for some great storytelling. This dark, gritty city paired with Dick Grayson's optimism created this beautiful contrast that made it just so much more fun to read. Dick didn't try to just fix the city, he became a light in a place surrounded by darkness. And that, to me, is some powerful storytelling. One of Dixon's best moves was creating Nightwing's own rogues gallery. No more borrowing villains from Batman's extensive roster. Nightwing needed his own baddies. And guess what? Dixon delivered that too. One of my favorite villains, Blockbuster, with his Kingpin-like vibes, is probably the best of the bunch. He's not just corrupt. He's a strong fighter who actually goes toe-to-toe with Nightwing, and his imposing size and Nightwing's smaller frame makes for some really cool fight scenes. That's something that we don't really see much of. And then there's Nightwing, which has a very similar name but spelled different, who's a vigilante who's thinking he's like Dick Grayson, but anything but, as he goes too far and just becomes unhinged. And there's other villains I enjoyed in this run as well, like Hela and Torque, but those two really stood out for me as characters well-rounded and a threat to Dick Grayson. And of course, Grayson still had that flirty playboy attitude, especially with characters like the Huntress, who he definitely did not see eye to eye with. And that part of Dick's character always had that fun dynamic because, while Bruce Wayne is a playboy, or makes believe he is, Dick Grayson is an actual playboy. But he's also a guy who generally just cares about people. It adds a nice depth to his character that sets him apart from his mentor. And honestly, I loved a lot of Dixon's run. The middle portion especially was filled with bombastic action, fun moments, and fantastic villains. But let's be real, if anybody's read this, towards the end of this series, things got messy, things started to fall apart, and his last 10 or maybe even 15 issues had a noticeable dip in quality. Dixon tried to dive into some bigger issues at the end, like police brutality, but I gotta say, it felt more forced and profound in this series anyway. It was like he wasn't fully invested in the topic, and it came off more hammy rather than powerful. Another problem that I had was the amount of crossover events Dixon had to juggle at the end. Just not good. 1 minute Nightwing is dealing with street level crime and personal issues, and the next he's fighting random Joker knockoffs. Without the proper context, it was like, what the hell is going on here? And that really dragged down the final stretch of this run. Luckily, Devin Grayson, the next writer, came on board and gave this series the boost that it needed to work again. Now, I know her run is super controversial, some people absolutely hate it, and I get why. We're going to talk about that later, but for me, the beginning of her run actually works really well. She took Dixon's idea of having Dick work as a police officer, and it clicked. It just worked better. In a corrupt city like Bloodhaven, working from the inside to fix the broken system makes perfect sense. It felt almost like Daredevil, balancing his daytime job with nighttime crime fighting, and the art from Rick and Mike Lilly, so good, especially when Slade or Batgirl, aka Cassandra Cain, the best Batgirl, shows up. It gave us some killer fight scenes that showcase Dick's acrobatic style perfectly. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Blockbuster does make a return in her run, and this guy is a real piece of shit villain. Watching him tear down everything Dick had built up over the course of 80 plus issues was rough, but in the best way. Eventually they have this brutal showdown and Dick gets pushed to the absolute brink. It's dark, it's intense, and it stretches him to his breaking point. But then, after Blockbuster is defeated, comes the infamous scene with Tarantula. Now, if you don't know, she forces Dick to have sex with her in a very manipulative, we won way. And it's deeply uncomfortable, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's gross, it's problematic, and this moment is so bad that the writer admitted years later that it was poorly executed. And the fact that Tarantula had been an interesting character up until that point made this moment even worse. Dick was so broken after this fight, it just felt wrong. It marked the start of the downhill slide of Devin Grayson's run as well for me. And from here, Dick's mental state just starts to unravel, and the next few issues focus heavily on that. Unfortunately, things take even a bigger nosedive as we go on, until issue 101, where we get a year one story from Dixon, which is pretty solid. I gotta say, you can just read it out of context and it still works. But then, Devin Grayson finishes her run with a rushed, messy, and I gotta say, confusing final issue that is weighed down by crossover events. The ending of her run is absolutely not good, but it's also not the worst thing. It just fizzles out. And hey, sometimes runs just fizzle out, and that's okay. The next one should be good, right? Right? Wrong, because Bruce Jones comes in, and oh my god. Bruce Jones, he had pretty much 7 issues, I believe, and they're all bad. Every single one. And let me just say this. As someone who loves his Hulk run, which is also controversial, this is one of the worst superhero runs I've ever read, and it's very, very short. The dialogue is cringy. Jason Todd's storyline is ridiculous here. Blood Brothers, what the fuck? And everything just falls flat so quick in this run that I have to say this is one of the few runs you can literally skip. And it's only 7 issues, or maybe less. And guess what? You don't have to read a single one and you won't miss a goddamn thing. This is absolutely the worst Nightwing run I read, unless we're going to count one that came later, which is even worse. Oh, we're going to talk about that, but not yet. So DC tried to course correct here by bringing in Marv Wolfman. Now, I'm not usually a huge fan of his work. He had some hits, like his Superman comics for me, but his take on Nightwing didn't really do much for me here. It's fine, it's not bad, it's just not great, it's kind of the middle of the road. People wanted him to come aboard because he wrote Teen Titans for so long, but I gotta be honest, he is past his prime at this point, and he does not write a Nightwing that is compelling, fun, interesting, or evolving at all. It's just standard superhero flair, and it's not very good even at that. So in comes the final part of the original run, which is Peter Tomasi, who basically wraps up the Nightwing run, the series, until of course it gets rebooted with New 52. But Tomasi's run was I guess, a breath of fresh air, at least compared to the previous 2 runs. I'm not crazy about this run like everybody else is, but I do think there are some really positive things about this run. For one, the Bat family dynamic is great, especially with the relationship with Tim Drake. Very solid. But honestly, the clone arc did not grab me, and that's the first one we come up to, so that was kind of a disappointment. But at least the Two-Face story was a lot stronger. The last part of this run where Dick becomes Batman during Batman's death was okay, but I gotta say it didn't feel as impactful as I hoped it would. And that pretty much wraps up the beginning of Nightwing. That's his first major run. But then we get into New 52. And, well, is New 52 good to Nightwing? Let's talk about it. Flash forward to 2011, and Nightwing gets a New 52 reboot along with the rest of the DC universe, and this time it's written by Kyle Higgins and Eddie Barrows, and Higgins stays on for 31 issues, essentially starting Dick Grayson's origins from scratch. And well, that can sometimes work. Hello, Wonder Woman New 52 run, I like you a lot. For me, Dick Grayson just does not get the same treatment. So the New 52 compressed Dick's backstory into just 5 years, and it just didn't work for me. The point of Nightwing was to make him stand on his own, but the New 52 relies heavily on the Batman world. We get tie-ins with the Joker, the Court of Owls, and it just feels like Nightwing is back to being Bruce's sidekick. This is not the Nightwing I love. Higgins was also growing as a writer, and while I think he's great with things like Power Rangers or even Radiant Black, his take on Nightwing didn't have the same pizzazz. I didn't feel like Dick was evolving as a hero, and the pacing was really off. And don't get me started on the ugly ass red costume. Absolutely a fucking atrocity to costumes. Higgins' run eventually ended with Forever Evil, where Nightwing dies. Well, sort of. I mean, it is comics, so nobody dies. But Batman fakes his death to keep him safe from the bad guys, and that's just a classic Batman move, am I right? So then we get the Grayson series. Now, this is where Dick dishes the Nightwing persona to become a super spy. It's written by Tom King and Tim Seeley, and this run was surprisingly decent. It was fun. It was like watching a lighter, goofier James Bond or Mission Impossible flick. It wasn't perfect, but Dick's time as a snappy spy with a cool suit, cracking jokes, and being a total badass was a fun change of pace from the more dour experience with New 52. It did get sloppy in places, and the ending was underwhelming, just like almost every single New 52 run, but it was solid and a different take on the character, and I will always appreciate a little bit different. And at this point, since he became a super spy, you're just thinking, well, he might be done for good. DC said no. They want to course correct with Rebirth. Nightwing returned in full force, blue suit and all, and it wasn't just a return to his old self. We had new supporting cast, fresh dynamics, and a deeper dive into Dick Grayson's world. And yes, of course, the blue suit. That meant a lot to me. So yeah, Nightwing has had his fair shares of ups and downs, but with Rebirth, it almost felt like we were finally getting back to the Nightwing we wanted. But did we? So if you don't know, DC's big push with the Rebirth was to bring the New 52 stuff and the pre-New 52 stuff and kind of combine them. Nightwing kind of got caught in the middle of that, but at least with Nightwing Rebirth by Tim Seeley and Yannick, it felt like we finally got back to his roots. For the most part, this run isn't perfect. I actually think it starts off a bit rocky, and right away we've got the Court of Owls returning, which, listen, I'm not a huge fan of them outside of Batman or written by Scott. So, wasn't a huge fan here. I thought they were being reused. But then we got Raptor, which was a new villain. He was more entertaining than some of the throwaway villains we have been getting the last few years, but he didn't feel the mighty threat that I was hoping. Things, though, really started clicking when we finally returned to Bloodhaven because, let's be honest, Dick staying in Gotham, constantly living under the Batman shadow, that just is not interesting. So we moved past that. We're back in Bloodhaven. There's a vibe again, the grime, the grit, Dick trying to find his place in the middle of all it. I always love redemption arcs when done right, and Seeley really shines with the character-driven moment. And then comes Defacer. aka Sean, and she's great. Seriously, I like her so much and I wish she stuck around longer. Their relationship had real depth, and the fact that she had to deal with consequences of their action in just personal life was really refreshing. It added weight. Plus, the stuff between Damian and Dick, perfect. Their dynamic still felt like Batman and Robin days, and for fans who have been here for a while, like myself, it was a nice emotional payoff. What works so well about Sean, though, is that she's a reformed villain trying to do better, and Dick, being who he is, just wants to believe that that can happen. You can never blame Dick for trying, because his heart is always in it. Whether it turns out good or bad, he's going to try, and that's what we love about the character. Blockbuster returns in a big and loud and exactly what he needed to be way. The arc closes out with Seeley's run with a fun bang. So it's not a perfect run by any means, but I think it holds up. It respects the character and gives us a solid version of Nightwing. And then Sam Humphries and Benjamin Percy jump in with their own mini arcs. Humphries' story is okay, not amazing, not awful, it's just kind of there. Percy's Bleeding Edge storyline is where things get pretty fucking weird. The tech paranoia story is a little too silly to take serious, and then we get this bizarre racing arc that feels, I don't know, like fucking Speed Racer. Listen, it's not good, but even that is still better than what comes next.
What the fuck is this?
Alright, so this is where things fall off a fucking cliff. Honestly, this might be the worst stretch of any main character, in my opinion, in comics, maybe ever. If you think Nightwing had some rough stories before, and he did with Blood Brothers, trust me, you haven't seen anything yet. And yeah, I read it all. That's why I'm doing this video. Every single issue. And this is the worst. So here's the setup. Batman and Nightwing are out on patrol, and KGB shoots Dick in the head. But don't worry, he survives, but with severe memory loss. Sounds like it could be an interesting direction, right? A story about rebuilding your identity, rediscovering who you are, your morals. Sounds actually pretty fucking good to me, right? Nope. What we get is Rick. That's right, not R-I-C-K, but R-I-C. What a stupid fucking way to spell your name. Shaved head, leather jackets, looking like he came out of fucking American History X in this shit, and he wants to start his life again. And guess what he becomes as his profession? Oh, guess. Oh, you won't guess in a million years. You're thinking, I don't know, maybe a police officer, a fireman, I don't know. He's gonna do something, right? He's courageous, he's Dick, he becomes a cab driver. A cab driver. Eventually, a crew of people decide to dress up as Nightwing. They want to push and be forceful against crime, and they become their own vigilante crew. It's absurd, and it's not fun in any way. The writing just doesn't work. This whole thing feels like a huge misstep. And that's because guess who's writing it? Scott Lobdell was behind all of it. And honestly, it felt like no one involved really understood the character. He is a horrible fucking writer. If you don't know, read New 52 Superman. He absolutely destroyed that character, and he's no better here. Absolutely destroying who Nightwing was. Eventually, Dan Jurgens steps in and kind of tries to stabilize things. The fake Nightwings get hunted by Talons, who are part of the Owls, and at least there's some direction again. Not great, but it's better than before. And then Joker War happens, and listen, I'm not going to go deep into this, but Dick just gets his memory back from comic book logic. It's just a reset button. But Rick is gone, Dick is back, and we can all breathe again, because after that, we finally get a rebirth again, almost reborn, with Tom Taylor's Nightwing. Now this feels like a reset done right. Tom Taylor clearly gets the character. He writes with his heart, and his love for Dick Grayson shows on every single page. The first issue of this run hits so hard. The letter from Alfred is one of the most emotional and beautiful moments I think I ever read in a superhero comic, and it felt like the perfect way to relaunch Nightwing with a sense of hope. And Bruno's art, oh my god, absolutely incredible. The visuals carry this entire series, in my opinion. Even the weaker parts of the story that come later still have amazing art. The first arc, though, redefines who Nightwing is, honoring his past while setting him up for something new. And we even get a brand new villain that starts pretty strong, though I think he loses steam later on. I really like the Heartless villain. Most fans love this run, and it's easy to see why. It's consistently well crafted and character focused. For me though, I'd say around issue 100, things start to feel a bit too safe for me. Still solid, but not as exciting as I was hoping for. Even at its worst though, it's closer to a 3 out of 5 at any worst issue, but compared to what came before, this is a fucking masterpiece. Let me just tell you, this is the best that Nightwing was. I mean, it's hard not to be when you compare it to Rick, but just in general, Nightwing needed this boost back to popularity. And currently we're on the Dan Watters run, and Watters is only a few issues in at the time of me writing this, but I'm really into it. It feels grounded again. It feels a little bit gritty. It feels more like the old school Dick, and I like that. Dick's focused on just helping these teens and fighting corporate corruption and has this street level hero energy I really love. It's just simple, but it's effective. So far anyway. So far, so good. And my final thoughts are this. We covered a lot of ground here. We just went through 30 years of fucking Dick Grayson, Nightwing. And Nightwing has some great runs and some absolutely awful runs. A lot of writers seem to start really strong and then fizzle out, struggling to close things in a satisfying way. But despite that, the fact that Nightwing has had a mostly consistent run since the mid-90s, 30 years just about, that's freaking impressive. From sidekick to full-fledged hero, Dick Grayson has come a long way. So no matter what, I think Nightwing will stick around. Between him and Superman, I think they represent something we need in all of our heroes. Hope. He is the heart of the DC universe. And when Nightwing is written well, that's exactly what he delivers. I hope you guys liked this video. I spent a lot of time reading every single Nightwing issue. Of course, I've been reading them throughout the years, but it was still a challenge on some of these runs. But some of them were absolutely a delight to read. So, the ones I mentioned that I did enjoy, go check them out. The ones I didn't enjoy, I'd say still check them out. You might like them a lot more than I did. If you like this video, hit the like button. If you love this video, hit the subscribe button. And biggest thing is, I want comments below. What's your favorite Nightwing one? What's your least favorite Nightwing one? What is your favorite Nightwing story? I did not talk about other stuff outside of the main continuity story, so there are other small one-shots or mini-series, but this really talks about the main Nightwing series for 30 years. I hope you guys all enjoy, and go read some good fucking comics.